As humans, we are bound by nature to grow attached to things we like, whether it's people, food, certain activities, or in today's case, entertainment. There is no better feeling than finding a show or movie that just completely understands you and makes you happy while watching. It's almost strange that people can love a cartoon about a group of superhero teens so much that it completely sends them into a riot when said show is canceled and rebooted into something completely different. Reboots, a word that sends the coldest chills down a fan's spine because you never know what you might get unless you're a Cartoon Network fan, as throughout the 2010s we saw many of their longtime franchises come back with these same looking new look reboots that many people, to put it lightly, weren't too fond of. You of course got the infamous Teen Titans reboot, Teen Titans Go, that dreadful Powerpuff Girls reboot, and Thundercats Roar, which I haven't seen, but I haven't heard much good about it, so I'm throw it in this category. But alongside those, we got a couple of decent reboots that people don't really tend to mention, like the Tom and Jerry reboot, Justice League Action, which was super overlooked, and Be Cool Scooby-Doo, which yes, is actually a good show. I know people didn't like it back then because the art style was looking yada yada yada, but if you actually sit down and watch it, it's actually not that bad. However, out of all these reboots, there was one specifically that was set up from the start and was practically doomed from the jump when it came to being received by the public especially, and I'm of course referring to Ben 10 2016. Ben 10 is one of Cartoon Network's most lucrative shows, spanning over 4 main series, having 2 live-action movies, 2 TV movies, and its huge gallery of merchandise from video games and hundreds, and I mean hundreds, of toys. Saying all this, it's really no surprise that Ben 10 was thrown into the reboot chamber, as it's one of their most iconic franchises, so why wouldn't you reinvent it for a younger generation? However, with a series as large of a reach as Ben 10 has, the reboot of course garnered attention immediately from tons of viewers, similar to Teen Titans Go. And like Teen Titans Go, it would get off to a horrible start, both as a show and in the eyes of the public. Speaking of viewers, 93% of you who view my videos are not subscribed. So please, if you see my content a lot, if you like my content, please remember to subscribe to the channel and leave a like on the video as well if you enjoy it, as it helps me continue to make quality content for you all. The Ben 10 reboot was practically doomed from the start. Before the show even aired, Cartoon Network was already shooting like Shaq at the free throw line with their reboot attempts. Cartoon Network had already rebooted 4 of their classic shows before Ben 10, being Teen Titans Go that aired in 2013, the Tom and Jerry Show which aired in 2014, Be Cool Scooby-Doo which was aggressively hated when it first aired in 2015, and the Powerpuff Girls reboot which aired in 2016. 3 out of these 4 shows were all hated to death by audiences while they were airing, so Cartoon Network announcing a 5th had people already writing it off as another piece of garbage. People's concerns were only enhanced when the announcement article highlighted the new show being targeted at the younger generation and included a first look at Ben and the show's new art style, which of course gave off the feel of that type of reboot that we've been getting. It's also important to mention that like Teen Titans Go, the Ben 10 reboot came after the cancellation of the more serious iteration of the franchise, as Omniverse was cancelled and left off on a cliffhanger in 2014, and the reboot only premiered 2 years later. Now, Teen Titans and Teen Titans Go at least had a 7-year gap in between their releases, making the need for a reboot make at least a little bit more sense. However, completely rebooting a franchise that only ended 2 years ago on a cliffhanger, teasing the cool idea of Ben, Gwen, and Kevin and Rook going on a space road trip, it is completely understandable that people would ultimately be against a reboot happening for Ben 10 after OV, especially so soon, and the hate only came harder when it finally aired its first season. Ben 10 2016 aired its first episode on October 1st, 2016, and as you can guess, it was met with tons of negative reviews. The Ben 10 reboot struggled to find its footing in its first season like many shows often do, but considering it was one of Cartoon Network's reboots, it wouldn't be given any grace, especially from Ben 10 fans. Now, season 1 of the reboot is honestly incredibly boring, with tons of uninteresting plot lines and humor that barely gets a smirk out of anyone over the age of 13. However, seeing older characters like Hex, Animal, and Zombozo return is pretty neat, along with a couple cool new villains like this Steam Smythe guy whose gimmick is based around a bunch of well-designed steampunk inventions. There's this Lord Decibel guy, a DJ with sound-based abilities, and Zingo, a cartoon character come to life which makes for some enjoyable scenes. Outside of that though, season 1 is super forgettable and skippable, as the season really isn't worth watching up until its finale, Omnitricked. But Many people never even watched the show to begin with or was able to stomach it for that long due to so many changes they made to certain elements of the franchise that from first glance turned off so many fans. Similar to when Omniverse came out, the biggest factor that turned people off was the show's art style, as the show continued the trend that these reboots set of having these very simple art styles that aren't very much to look at. While shows like Teen Titans Go, the Powerpuff Girls, and Total Dramarama can get away with this style of art direction, Ben 10 really can't, as the Ben 10 franchise was built on its expressiveness, like the gross and freaky looks of the aliens in Classic or the extremely detailed moments of Omniverse. The reboot having this art style loses a lot of that expression and sauce, like the drastic redesign of Stingfly that ripped away everything that made him unique in the Prime continuity and instead gave him so many human-like proportions and details. It took away his tail, gave him more identifiable eyes in the process, and it's all just like, no, kill this thing, get this shit the fuck away from me. They do a similar thing with Wildvine too, making him more human looking and stripping him of his more extreme alien-like features. These redesigns and changes sort of represent the problem with the reboot, as a lot of what they changed just make the show feel even more bland and boring. They also ended up changing Upgrade's color palette to purple and black, and while this change is like far from being bad, it's just one that I personally dislike because I know some fans out there actually like the new look for Upgrade, surprisingly. But one thing that always did confuse me though is that Forearms wears the black and white shirt from Classic, but Diamond Head wears Ben's new shirt in this reboot. Like, why do that? There's even some concept art that has Diamond Head wear a black and white attire, so like, why not just keep that and just keep things consistent? Looking at the reboot's concept art also shows that they were eyeing more unique designs, and I kind of dig some of these look. However, I'm glad they scrapped some. Like this one, like what the fuck is this? And why does he look like that? Another complaint the show faced was the new take on the characters. It's not shocking though that the characters in this new reboot aimed at children aren't the same deep and layered characters that we grew up with. But many people can't seem to understand that. So seeing Ben become this flanderized version of his classic continuity counterpart, being an absolute goofball and an idiot, didn't vibe with most, if you can believe it. To be honest though, this new take on Ben wasn't really that egregious, especially since he was 10 years old again in the reboot. But for me, the real issue lies with Grandpa Max. Now, like I said, it's not shocking that most of these characters in the show are very one note and are played for jokes, as the show's aimed for kids. But I just wish Max was handled similar to how Gwen is in the show, as she isn't all that different from her classic counterpart. Grandpa Max in the Prime shows was easily the best written character, as he was caring, skilled, and just all around a lovable dude. But in the reboot, he's just a goofy old ass man that I still don't know what to make up to this day. I'm not asking for him to be the old Max, just be a somewhat memorable character, as Reboot Max is by far the weakest part of this show. Now, it's kind of unfair to constantly compare the reboot to the previous iteration, considering it's a completely different take, and the reboot doesn't come close to matching the Prime shows in quality, but honestly, that's okay, because that was never the goal of the show. The goal of the show was to introduce younger audiences to the world of Ben 10, and some of you aren't gonna like what I'm about to say here because it's time to give Reboot its flowers. Compared to all the other Cartoon Network reboots that people shit on, I feel like Ben 10 is one of the best ones from that standpoint, and it's not as bad as people made it out to be. For starters, the show is so much better after its first season. From the season 1 finale and onwards, the show becomes a lot more tolerable. The show goes on to do some pretty interesting things. One of the main ones being its portrayal of Vilgax. Before Vilgax comes into the plot, we actually get to see Benny use him as a transformation that's referred to as Gax, who has super strength, laser vision, and these tentacle arms. Now, this was super cool to see, as it's something the OG series never did that always seemed like a missed opportunity, though Ben does end up losing this transformation once Vilgax absorbs it to obtain his true form, and contrary to what you may think, this Vilgax is actually treated like an actual character. Instead of being a power-hungry, emotionless, intimidating force this time around, he's got a bit more personality to him. This time, he's a power-hungry but intelligent force of nature. Kevin is also here in the reboot, and even though I dislike him having his own Omnitrix, he's actually a pretty well-handled character. In the reboot, he's more of a rival to Ben instead of being a flat-out antagonist. The reboot treats the majority of these characters from the past with respect. I mentioned it briefly, but a lot of the other returning villains in the reboot are treated with such grace and are not wasted at all. They really take every opportunity to really use these characters to their potential. A lot of the changes this show makes to these characters outside of what they do to Ben and Max honestly work, and some of them are even better than what the previous show did. Like how they handle Gwen and Ben's relationship this time around, not having them endlessly argue like they do in Classic, making the relationship way more easier to enjoy. They also continue the trend of giving Ben new look Omnitrixes that all come with with sleek, pleasing designs, and as well as their own little gimmick. Though the gimmicks do kind of get old as they kind of peak with the Omni enhancement due to the fact that they were caused by Ben unlocking a new alien called Shockrock, who affected the rest of his aliens, which added some cool exclusive lore to the reboot. Shockrock and Slapback are two of the reboot's new alien transformations and are both dope as fuck. Though I have nothing really to say about Overflow other than just, you know, he's just kind of there. He's not really that big of a deal. And Surge is just a big old like, why do you exist? Speaking of aliens, one thing I really appreciate them for doing is bringing back some of the Alien Force aliens to throw at 10-year-old Ben to mess around with. And I'm so glad they did it. Wrath, Jetray, and even Humongosaur all really look cool in the reboot style. And I mean, like, especially Humongosaur. And me being a certified Humongosaur hater, I have to put that hate aside to admit that he looks fucking amazing in the reboot, and it's honestly his best design in the franchise. People always like to say these reboots disrespect their original counterparts, and while it may be true for other shows,
when I first met you, I thought you were weird and annoying. And you are.
The Ben 10 reboot shows a lot of respect to the original shows, other than that one small Alien Force joke they made in season 1.
No, Kyle, we're not giving up on you.
I don't know, Quinn. He's a bad dude.
No, Bob. No dude is too bad to save.
Blech! Why so serious? I hope this gets rebooted.
The show shouts out the OG show a ton. We see Reboot Ben with the classic t-shirt and the Omniverse hoodie. As I just mentioned, they bring back some of the UAF aliens for 10-year-old Ben to mess around with. Like all the other series as well, we get a Ben 10K episode. The reboot got a TV movie that gave us a look at some aliens that Ben never got to use in this show, like Blitzwolfer, Eye Guy, Ghost Freak, Ripjaws, and Wildmud. And it also gave us a look at the Incursions and of course Azimuth. The reboot is also one of the few things in the world to remember that Generator Rex actually existed, and even though this crossover is not the best, I have to salute them for continuing the Ben 10 and Generator Rex connection. The biggest sign of respect though was a 45-minute special Alien Extinction that brought back versions of these Bens from the Prime universe along with Gwen 10 and did such a good job at handling these versions of Ben. Ben 10 2016 takes so many opportunities to show love to what came before with how it handles majority of the characters we saw in past iterations, continuing trends set up by the OG shows like seeing new Omnitrixes and introducing these new gimmicks, and the numerous appreciative nods to the Prime universe itself. Though unfortunately, it just all went underlooked because season 1 made such a bad impression. It's really disappointing knowing that the Ben 10 reboot was practically doomed from the start. The reputation of reboots had been tarnished even before it was announced, so hearing a beloved show like Ben 10 will be next to suffer the reboot treatment obviously upsetted many. And while the reboot is far from perfect even after that struggle of first season, since you'll still get some head scratching moments and jokes that just aren't funny, I personally believe it successfully reintroduces IP to a younger generation. I mean, it had a total of 166 episodes, its own TV movie, 2 video games, and a large amount of quality toys to show for it. Obviously, you're allowed to dislike the show, and I myself still have it at the bottom of my rankings, and I barely rewatch it. But if you look past the bad first season, the unappealing art style, and just the typical things these reboots are prone to do, you'll see that the Ben 10 reboot does some things with the franchise that honestly can get you interested, because like us fans, it has a lot of love for those older shows. Recently, I've seen people go back and really rewatch some of these reboots and say that they actually aren't that bad. Like I've seen people praise Teen Titans Go, saying it has some good moments and jokes, but no one has done the same for the Ben 10 one. With all that being said though, let me know down below how you feel about the Ben 10 reboot, even though I feel like I'm gonna know what the answers are gonna say. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Let me know your thoughts, let's talk about it. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like on it and consider subscribing to the channel, as I'm trying to reach 30,000 subscribers, and thanks to you all, we just hit 20K, so thank you all for all the support. If you want to support me even more, you can directly become a member of the channel for only $1 a month. It's not mandatory, completely optional. But with all that being said though, it's been your boy Dan, Boy Wonder, signing out. Peace.